You're listening to Life Check Yourself with life coach, transformational leader, and dating and relationship badass, Marni Battista. Every week, you'll get the raw truth from top experts and real people on the important life and love issues you want to know about. So, if you're ready to life check yourself in your relationships, your career, and the areas of your life that matter most to you, and you're not afraid to be called out on your, stuff, then you're ready for what's next.
Life Check Yourself with Dr. Debra Mandel. Unhealthy mother-daughter relationships. The #1 way to heal.
Ladies, welcome. This is probably going to be one of my most anticipated episodes because I am all, parent of daughters. And we have Dr. Debra Mandel here today to enlighten us. If you don't know who she is a nationally renowned psychologist, over 30 years of experience. But if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll look at her and you'll be like, that's impossible because she's looks so amazing. She brings her no-nonsense yet compassionate approach. And she's the author of 4 books, including, love this title, Dump That Chump. And she's been featured on national television and radio as a relationship expert. And she's got a new book coming out called Sassy and Rude, Her New Attitude, to explore the complexities of mother-daughter relationships. And for those of you who don't know, I have 3 adult daughters who are like almost 28, 26, and 22, which is insane because it goes so fast. But why I really wanted to have you on the show is because, for 15 years, working with women primarily and helping them initially deal with like their relationship issues, intimate relationship issues, one naturally goes back to childhood relationships. And while I think it's much chronicled that, if you have a daddy issue, then you're going to have issues with men, I'm going to say that mommy issues are also a huge, huge catalyst. And I was just with some really good friends of mine and a mom and her daughter, and I'm friendly with both of them. The daughter's in her 30s, and the mom messaged me, and she was like, my daughter was saying, like, the things you said to me and the things you didn't say make me feel sometimes not great about myself. And she's like, I sobbed. It was like a moment, right? And so I think it's a really important conversation so that we can do better if we have young children, and if we're grown-ass women, that we can sort our shit out. That's why I wanted you to be here. So first of all, you wrote a book, Dump That Chump, and now you're talking about mother-daughter relationships. Like, how? What's the story? How did you get here?
Oh, that's a big question, but thanks for asking. I'm very excited to be here, and thanks for having me on. Well, Dump That Chump, I must confess, was based on a real relationship I was in.
Yeah.
Totally inspired me to write that book. I mean, it was disguised, but most of my friends knew, oh gosh, she's talking about her real life, because even though I worked with hundreds of women who have been in bad relationships, mine was a doozy with a sociopath, and we don't even want to get into that. But
right, that's a whole other interview, right?
That's another interview in and of itself. So what inspired me to write the book on mothers and daughters, well, first of all, the original title, which I think you will appreciate knowing a little bit of your personality, was called Why Is She Such a Bitch?
Yes, exactly.
Yes. However, the publisher would not accept that.
Damn those publishers, they're so annoying.
So I changed it, and it was kind of at the final hour, but, it's a pretty good title, Sassy and Rude, because, look, moms can be sassy and rude, daughters can be sassy and rude. I was inspired to write this book. It was a funny little story because I actually wrote the proposal for this book, I think it was about 14 years ago or more, when my daughter was a late teen. And we were going through it, man. We had a tough time of it. So I wrote the proposal, but it didn't get sold to a publisher. And I was actually in the hospital for a paper cut gone rogue, actually, which no one could really appreciate or understand, but it was terrible. And I'm here in this bed hooked up to IV tubes of antibiotics, and I get a email from my agent that says, oh, somebody's very interested in your Why Is She Such a Bitch proposal. I'm like, okay, great. So several years after I wrote it, and my daughter and I have gone through many ups and downs, of course, as do, but that's what inspired it. So it took on many different transitions, if you will, throughout the course of my time as both a mother and as a daughter. And my mother died very young. We'll get into that in a little bit. And also just all the countless mothers and daughter duos that I have worked with. And so they're in the book.
I love that. Okay. Well, so first of all, is it true that it's harder today to be a daughter, a young daughter? Is it harder today to be a daughter as mothers of toddlers or mothers of teenagers or mothers of young adults? Is it harder now because of social media and woke culture? And I feel like they're more emotionally intelligent, so they get a little sassy because in some cases they're right. But is it harder, or is that just us because our parents didn't talk about it?
I grapple with that question constantly because it's such a good question. But if you think back as when you were a young girl, which was probably like 5 years ago, and saying you complimented me, pay it forward. No, really, it seems like it's been a long time, but we think back at that time and we say, oh, it was tough to be a daughter then. And so I think every generation, just like we say, oh, our parents are so old fashioned or they didn't get it then, there's always new information and new technology that's coming down the pike. So who knows whether it's harder or not? I don't know. I can't really answer that question with any specific data, but I would say that the social media has a whole influence that is very challenging because it's so pervasive. It's so accessible. It's just right in your face all the time. And I have to tell you, I see so many young women with body image issues and self-esteem issues, even more so. And I actually specialized in eating disorders when I came out of graduate school because I had one, and it was a really huge topic for me to try to help people with that. And I just merely looking at this stuff online, it's kind of horrifying to some degree, right? And how do you even stop it? Because if you stop it, then you're alienating your daughters, right? Because they want to be part of the scene. And if you encourage it, then you're creating a monster. So it's a really tough call on that one.
So yeah, because I thought about that too, of like, well, the technology that we had was new technology for our time, right? But in the end, like, we don't want to let, I think, the circumstances be our excuse for not, learning how to be better, right? And how to navigate through it. Because I know just from being alive, right, that back in the day, right, in the 60s, in the 50s, right, like my stories my mom used to tell, right, about being a young daughter, right, and smoking cigarettes in front of her mother and all these things, right, that like it's always been a thing for mothers and daughters. So tell me this, like, what do you see? How do you like look at it? Like, if you have younger kids or teenagers, what do women need to know right now that have daughters that are teenagers? And then we'll kind of go back and say, like, well, then how do you make it better if you have a younger child?
Absolutely. It's a great question. I think the most important thing is for moms to accept that they have to be moms and not necessarily the friends of their children. We've been hearing this for decades. This is not new. It's not hot off the press here. We have heard this, but it's very much a challenge because one of the things that happens developmentally is the separation individuation process. And so young girls are destined to have to push off against their moms. They have to push away to some degree to be different, because I'm not going to get into gender issues, but there's a mother-daughter and there's a father-son kind of dynamic that's a little bit different for each. But daughters do need to feel like they become their own person. So in the teenage years, they are having this push-pull. They want to be close to their moms. They love the idea of having mom as a friend. At the same time, they want to be their own person. So it can be a really big challenge. And moms so frequently fall into what I call the too nice mom syndrome, which is, I want to do everything for my daughter. And that's kind of where it came from for me, is that my mom was not a showy, affectionate, loving kind of mom. And I needed that. That was me. My soul energy is very compassionate and sensitive and loving. I can be fun and flirty and have a great time being sassy and silly, but I really love that in my core. And she was not that mom. And I really, really missed that. And I think that I overboarded myself doing the pendulum swing. Like, oh my God, I give my daughter everything, whatever, just you're crying for a second. What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And moms have a hard time sometimes of setting those boundaries. So that's really critical in parenting today, is having loving boundaries, but boundaries nonetheless.
Yeah, I think that that's such a hard thing. We come from overreacting to our own childhood, right? And then, add into the mix wanting to be liked generally, like wanting, to be liked or loved. Throw in maybe a divorce. Like that was my situation where I was like, oh God, please, like, I don't want you to like dad better, right? Like if I'm nicer and more cool, would you like me better, right? Which I had to check myself on that. But I remember that moment for me where I had to have a conversation with my oldest daughter and be like, I don't like this any more than you do. You're putting me in the position of like not being cool, but like I can't be cool because you're not, you're making me be mean. And I have to do it. Yeah. And I just remember having that conversation of like, I wish I didn't have to do this, but like, I kind of don't care if you like me right now. It's my job to keep you safe. That was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel for you on that one in terms of, divorced family. Yes, it's a challenge, especially if, I don't know if you were more the primary parent or if you had to do more of the responsibilities, but that's often the case, is that the moms have to shine and they have to do what they have to do. It's so hard to put your foot down on that one. It's so hard to set those limits to make sure that your daughter feels safe. Both, any of your children, if you had,
I
saying
didn't have any sons, but yeah, no, for sure. Right. But what's really crazy is how old's your daughter now? She's older, right?
31. Yeah.
31. Yeah. So I think what's interesting, and maybe you can give some advice for people that are in the middle of the teenage years, is, when you do have that, like my friend, when you have the conversation with your adult daughter and you look back and my kid saying like, you were the one who gave us boundaries and that created stability. So thank you. Right. And I think that when you're in it, you don't know what's going to happen. And so what advice do you have for a mom who's got a sassy and rude teenager? Any scripts, any advice? What do you have on the table?
It's so cute that you asked that, because my first answer is, when there's, it's going to sound terrible, dog training, they say, wait for it.
Yep.
Right. So it's almost as a mom, you have to be able to say, okay, I know it's a very ungrateful job for a long time, but you wait for it, because if you just do the right thing, and I don't even know to say the right thing, but you just do the best you can. That's so important, is having a clean sweep of good intentions. If we have good intentions and we know we're doing the best we can, we're going to make mistakes. I used to tell my daughter when she was younger, I have a college fund for you and a therapy fund.
Right. Me too. That's so funny. I'm like, you could just make a note of this in your phone, talk to my therapist about it later.
So the advice that I give is to, be meaningful, be conscientious, be kind, and still be firm, but also be open-hearted. And that's where I think a lot of parents get stuck, is that we want to be right, because if we're supposed to be the parent, then we're supposed to be right. We're not going to be right most of the time, because all we have is the limited knowledge that we have at any given time. And just like we were talking about, what we know today than what we knew 30 years ago is so much more. And yet we still don't know very much. So we're learning constantly. It's just an ever-ending new challenge of finding new resources. So be open-minded. When your daughter says something to you that you want to understand and experience, empathize with her feelings. Doesn't mean you have to agree with her. It doesn't mean that you can't set limits, but you can be responsive to understanding her experience, because that's where a lot of daughters have issues with their moms later on, and where that sassiness really comes up, is that the sense of, you don't hear me, you don't see me, you don't know me. That's
right.
Get that.
It is. I was telling someone, and I'm not a parenting expert, by the way, so thank God you're here. You know, like
myself an expert either. I just have a lot of
experience. But I remember, so I had 3 daughters, right? So someone I met once said, I wish I could write a book called How to Parent Your First Kid Like the Third. It's so great.
I love it.
Right? I thought that was great. So by the time my younger one, she was like 7 years younger than my other daughter, and she was like 14 and 15 and entering into the zone of hell. I remember thinking, and sometimes saying, which is probably super annoying, but I'd be like, wow, you are so good at this. Like you were being such like a teenager, like kudos to you, you know, like,
yeah.
Don't ask me how my day was, you know, like, why are you asking me so many questions? And I'd be like, check. Cause I had I knew that like, that's what they do and they like get through it. But when you're in it, it's your first time, especially. So what do you say when your kid is like, you're asking me so many questions, or what are you doing? Nothing. You know, like, how is your day? Fine. What do you do? What are the words that embody what you just said we need to do? Compassion and understanding.
I'm going to relate a little to something that I learned when I was new in my career. I was very young when I got out of graduate school and in graduate school. I was very young. I will state that on record. So I was 21 and seeing clients already. And
right.
I opted for teenagers because at least I was a little older than they were. So I was working with this one kid, and he looks at me and I'm crying, and I had no boundaries because I'm just listening to his sad story. It was just terrible. And he says, Debra, how am I going to tell you my story if you're the one crying? And I thought, oh my gosh, okay, I've really got to learn something here. And what I needed to learn was that to be a person who you're going to be giving advice to somebody younger, you're going to be there for somebody. I've not actually lost your actual question, but I felt like I was going in some particular.
What are the words that you say when your kid is really asking me questions? I don't know.
So thank you. So what I was taught at the time was you have to also learn how to ask more open-ended questions, because when you say something like, how are you today? Fine. You get a one-word answer. Oh, tell me something interesting about your day. Your kid may still say, I have nothing to tell you. Okay. Then you say, you know what? I know that you want to shut me out right now. I love you dearly. I would really love to know what's going on with you. So if anytime you'd like to share, I'm here for you. Because you have to, again, wait for it. Accept that they're not always going to be responsive and wanting to share with you at the time that you're wanting the information. So
that's so good. So again, I'm just giving you examples from my own life. I remember picking my kid up from school. That's why I use that example is like, you're like, how was your day? Especially in that transition, I think from like when they're 11 and 12 and they're still kind of cute. Although they're probably a teenager earlier now. Is that true? Are they?
Yes. Actually, there's research that supports that. I mean, puberty is younger these days. I mean, also, especially in divorced families, if there's a stepdad, young girls mature much faster. I'm not sure what all that's about, but it's a real thing. Yes.
Okay. So there's that thing, right? And they're like so cute. You pick them up and they're like 7 or 8 and they're like, hi, mommy, I made a picture today. And you're like, oh, yay. And then one day it just seems like it stops. And I remember I figured that out. And my daughter get in the car and she was like 14 or 15. She had a phone and she would catch up, right? Like we do when we wake up in the morning or whatever, you want to catch up because you could be on your phone all day. And then I would be like, how was your day? And she'd be like, don't ask me that right now. Like, okay. And so then I had to wait for it, right? And then I'd get in the car and I'd be like, are we good? Is there a late? She was like, good. Or sometimes then when it became funny, she'd be like, green light, you can ask me now how my day was, right?
I love that. Green light. That's amazing. Yeah. I can commiserate with all of that. I remember taking my daughter to school. I think it was the transition, maybe it was 5th grade or something. And it went from, oh my gosh, Mom, I'm going to live with you for the rest of my life, to don't you dare touch my hand when we're walking into school. And it's that heart-crushing moment where you just say, oh, wow. Okay. So, I mean, I hated getting up early, by the way. My daughter decided that she wanted to take the early classes, always the early classes, starting at 7. I'm like, oh God, that means it's 6 o'clock up. That's not me. Okay. But I would carpool just so that I could hear her friends talk, because her friends love to tell me the stories.
What was going on? Yeah.
Right? So it was like a little bit manipulative there, but it was true. I wanted to hear that. But that's the key. Is I love the green light thing. It's like, have a code with your daughter to say, look, I know I'm going to be inappropriate because I'm your mom and I want to know everything, but it's not always going to be the right time for you. So you give me the signal as to when that's going to work for you. And by the way, this is in a more ideal circumstance that I'm talking about. There are many strained mother-daughter relationships where this kind of advice is not going to go over well. If you've got, there's a history of mental illness, or if there's trauma, abuse, etc., that has happened for somebody in their life, then it's going to be a whole different set of circumstances that require much more delicate attention.
Awesome. And that's so good to know. Because if you're listening, you're like, that's never going to happen in my world. It probably won't. And so then you need to like have your own, cultivate your own customized way of dealing with the human that lives with you. So what are the common misperceptions then about repairing difficult or strained mother-daughter relationships? And how does your new book challenge all of those?
Well, what's really important is to accept what you have control over and what you don't. And I did write this book for moms of adult daughters specifically for that reason, because it's a different bird when you're talking to somebody where you're still completely responsible for their lives. But once they are adults, although I don't really know when that division is between, are we still responsible, or are we not, at what time, whether they are financially independent, blah, 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 all those things, those factors. But at some point, we're learning that our adult daughters, they are in control of their own choices, decision making, and it's up to them. So we can do the best we can. The most important thing that we can do is forgive ourselves for the mistakes that we made, but own up to them, own them. Because that's one of the things that moms don't like to do, is to say, I made a mistake. I failed in some way. So you did. So what? Get rid of that shame, that blame, that guilt, etc., and instead be able to be real and ask your child, how did I wound you? One of the things that I did in the book was I asked a bunch of young women to please tell me, answer these several questions about, what did your mom do that really hurt you? What did your mom do that really helped you? What would you wish you would never change about your mom? Just really get
that's so fascinating.
Your own experience with your mom. And it was so beautiful to me. The heartfelt love that came out of these young women was so touching to me, that they were not venomous toward their moms. They were not hateful. They were just like, God, this really hurt me. Why would she just never just accept that or own that? So it's really important to just be able to be candid about what you do that may have not worked for your kid.
So you can talk to your adult daughter and say, in my own work, I've realized that I was overly critical, or I, wasn't affectionate, or I worked too much, or whatever it is. And you can have that conversation as a way to begin healing and repairing.
Yes. And with the understanding that you may hear something that doesn't ring true to you. For instance, one of my daughter's responses was that I didn't make cookies with her enough. And you know what? I made a lot of cookies with her. It's one of my favorite things. I mean, I know I did, but it wasn't enough for her. Or I didn't run to the room fast enough because it was down the hall when she cried. It was too long for her when she was 3 years old and she cried. In her memory, it was too long for her. So what you're saying is, I hear what you're saying, and that's your experience. You may not agree with the perception. We don't have to agree with the perception to be able to be empathetic. And that's
so deep.
Really key feature.
Absolutely. So this ties into then, so what role does shame and guilt, come in, and how does that, our own shame and our own guilt, as we're trying to parent young women, how does that then factor in once you sort of talk about those issues?
Yeah. And I think you kind of said it earlier where women often don't feel good about themselves. And so not to mention just the cultural influence in terms of how we see ourselves is profoundly disturbing to some degree, in terms of the imagery that we're presented as what we're supposed to be. And then if you couple that with having had a parent, both parents, or a mom who wasn't very loving or wasn't very nurturing or didn't know how to be, we're going to carry a lot of shame and a lot of wound in our hearts and not feel good about ourselves. And then oftentimes we become parents believing that we can overcome that simply by being a parent. And that's not how it works. We have to heal our own wounds from our historical legacy, right? So like, for instance, my mom, both my parents were immigrants. My dad was a Holocaust survivor. My mom was, before, she was from Estonia, and then it became part of Russia. They went to Sweden, then she came to Canada, and my mom and dad met when she was very young. She was 19. My dad was 33. I mean, big age difference.
Right.
Children when she was still like, oh my God, can't even imagine having a child at 21 or 22.
Yeah, my mom too. Yep.
So she had no idea. She had no idea. She was a model. She was independent. She did all this stuff, and she didn't know how to be a mom. So for her, it was like, slap you on the hand. You have a glass that's sitting on the table that you didn't finish with your water. If you got up to go to the bathroom, the glass was done and you were punished. I mean, this was the way that she parented. And I love my mother deeply, but she did not know how to be a mom. Now, if my mom could have ever said to me, honey, I'm sorry I made mistakes, my whole heart would have just melted. But instead, till her death, she was only 58 years old, and I was a young woman, I think at 33 or whatever.
Yeah.
And, had my daughter, and I never got a chance to heal with her. She told me I was the worst daughter on the planet because trying to get her out for her anorexia and for other things that she was going through. I loved her so much, and I know that she loved me, but she didn't know how to just fess up to, you know what? I didn't know what I was doing. I'm so sorry, honey. If I would have heard those words even once, my heart would have melted. So the best thing that we can do for our kids along the way is just keep being humble. Keep saying, do the best I can. It's probably not going to be right, but I do have your best interest at heart.
I think that's so beautiful. I was just thinking about my mom also. We have parallel lives. My mom died really young in like 64, but she had smoked cigarettes and died of cancer. But I remember having that moment with her where she was like, did I do a good job? And at that point, right, I was like, oh my God, I'd gone to therapy. I had done the work, I had done a lot of stuff. And I was like, oh God, no guilt, no shame, no, right? Like you did the best, the best. And I love you. And I think that's so important for anyone listening. Like, you don't have to wait for the right time. Exactly. It's never going to be perfect, but like, how can you initiate these kinds of conversations? And while you can, right?
Yeah. And I think that when we set that stage, when we open up that dialogue, that conversation, it does invite our daughters to actually be more heartfelt and be able to also share their truth about things in a more compassionate way. But when we're fighting that, when we're at this power struggle type of experience, then we get into it. And then it's like you versus me versus you versus me. And that's never helpful. And you're a relationship expert, right? So and by the way, I've been having a lot of clients for you for.
Oh, good. I love that. That's so great. Because I think, I was teaching this class and we were talking about the idea of your ego is like a shopping cart, and like society puts all this stuff in the shopping cart. And I think for a lot of us as women that have children, like good mom, whatever that means, is in there, right? And so, we hold the story of what we did very tight. And so I think it takes a lot of courage to be able to say, I could still be a good mom and not be a perfect mom.
Yeah. And I think that we have some kind of go into some types just because it's fun to categorize and characterize people to some degree. So we've got like perfectionist Pia or woo-woo Wilma. There's the concept of the type of mom that you chose to be as a too nice mom. Chose, maybe the wrong word, but adopted is not going to be the best fit for your own child, right?
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
You don't know. You're not like saying like, by the way, which version of me would you like for your optimate development? Yeah. No, you can't do that, unfortunately.
That sense of flexibility is really important because we get locked in. I love your concept of ego in the cart because we get locked into this. Well, this is the right way to be. But again, what is the right way to be? We're learning every day. Every day.
Amen. Okay, let me ask you this. So if we have a listener who is dealing with a sassy daughter, or we have a daughter who's dealing with a challenging mom, what's one of your favorite tools from the book that can give people a little place to get started or to just think about differently? And by all means, everyone, the book link will be in the show notes, and I think we all need to read it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I have what I call the sugar and spice exercises.
Okay.
Kind of cute, which is just a way at the end of each chapter, there is some tool or some ideas to try to create a healing tree is what I want for people. I want people to see that, there is a pearl somewhere in this. So the most important things I think that are easily done is to be open-minded, to ask open-ended questions, to say, hey, I would, imitation, right? I do this with people too who have very wounded histories. Their hearts are hurt with their inner child. I'm going to invite you to my party. I'm inviting you to show up to my party. So this is a daughter-mother healing party. I want to have you come so that we can really let go of and heal those things that are standing between us. And if you come with that kind of heart, generally speaking, your daughter's going to be open, unless you have been very manipulative, which is something that a lot of people need to understand, is that sometimes we think that we're being really kind, and in actuality, we're being very manipulative. And our daughters are going to sense that.
Wow. Okay. So what is an example of manipulative? Because I have something I want to reality check, life check with you. Like, was I being judgmental or was I being appropriate?
Well,
I knew it. These, my oldest one is really literally a grown ass woman. And I'm like, this is different.
So, okay. So if you say, I'm welcoming you to this experience, and then the first thing you say is, but you know what, that's wrong. Or you know what, no, I don't agree with you. You've just shut the door.
Yeah.
So if you have to be able to understand, I'm sorry for those words because I don't mean them.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's really best if you can really get to a place where, like I said earlier, empathy does not mean agreeing with perception. So we can have completely different perceptions of things, but I can still empathize with how you got to your feelings. So if I accidentally slam the door on your finger and you're hurting, and you say, why did you do that to me, you horrible person, you horrible bitch? I can say, you know what? Okay, I get it. That's how you interpreted my actions, but I understand that you're in pain no matter what. It doesn't matter what my intentions were. I still understand that you're in pain. Now, once you've empathized, then you can have an explanation, because a lot of times our children really do well, our daughters, when we have a context that we can give them, but that's later on, right? The context. Like I think it's really important that my daughter knew where my family's background, where they came from and what happened.
Right.
It caused a lot of intense scarring. Right. A funny story. I was in graduate school and I was at an internship, and my dad had this thing where he wanted me to call him every single day because he lost almost everybody in the Holocaust. So almost his entire family was annihilated. So he had one brother left and a few scattered relatives. So calling him was super important. I would miss a day or so, and then it would be, you never call me. Well, Dad, I called you 363 days this last
right.
But one day I'm talking to him, and it's the old days. I'm really dating myself. Payphones. I'm calling payphone. I'm at a college that I'm seeing college students, and I'm talking to him, and he starts talking to me in Polish. I don't speak Polish, but he reverted to his childhood, and he started to speak to me in another language because he was making soup, and his parents had a soup kitchen, and it reminded him of being a child in their soup kitchen. So he was talking to me in Polish, and I kept saying, Dad, 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 Dad. What I'm saying is that trauma, he had so much trauma that he never dealt with any of it. And it passed along to me, my sister, to the rest of us, and trauma with my mother, and my mother had trauma. So if we don't heal that trauma, we are going to reenact it in some crazy form with our kids. So it's so essential that we identify what those wounds are that we're still carrying and how they may be affecting our parenting.
And so and then when our kids are age appropriate, and maybe you can tell me what that age is, if there is such a thing, to share that. Because I remember, again, I don't know, I remember having a conversation with my daughter when they were older about sort of like not feeling feeling less than whatever with their dad when they were younger in the divorce thing. And when my daughter, one of them was older, I was like, this is like a thing I need to work on, because I was like so clearly not the favorite when I was growing up. I was like not picked. It was like so freaking crystal clear. I wasn't the golden child. I'm totally reacting, projecting. This is a me problem. I know you love me. You don't need to try harder or do anything better. But like, at what age do you say that? Like, at what age is it appropriate for a kid to feel safe if you tell them that?
I think my answer to that is going to be, you need to read your child, right?
Got it. Okay.
Children are really sophisticated and can handle a lot. And others, it's like, wow, it's like the Charlie Brown, too much.
Yeah, they're like, I don't want to know that. Like that, yeah.
So then it becomes a situation where I think you say something akin to, hey, I have some stuff I'd love to share with you if you ever are interested in that, because I think it would help put things in perspective. And I would love to be able to be closer to you in that way. And you'd be surprised how much that can encourage a child to want to hear more. And sometimes they're going to say, what are you talking about? I'm going to like, let it go. Who cares, right? So it's timing and your individual relationship with your daughter.
Do you have an example of a challenging mother-daughter relationship that, you know, really did this healing work to be able to create a close connection even when mistakes were made? I would love to share some hope with some ladies who are listening who might be like, I don't know, is it too late? My daughter and I don't get along.
So I actually have a chapter where I do address that it may not be the right timing and it may never be the right timing, but I do have lots and lots of positive stories. So I will share one that I think is very hopeful. So there was a mom who, she was a single mom, divorced mom, and her daughter came back to live with her, kind of like was it a failure to launch, or did she launch?
Yeah.
Didn't launch, and then she came back. But it made sense for them to live together because it was a right situation for both of them to save money. It was meaningful to have that richness. But two peas in a pod, boy.
Oh no. Okay.
Just struggling because the mom was so used to being her daughter's best friend. And her daughter really wanted to grow up. And actually, her daughter now at this point was in her late 20s, I would say. And she wanted to be dating. She wanted to have her own life. She wanted to kind of like a roommate situation, but not really with her mom, so to speak.
Right. Yeah.
And the mom was just hurt, just deeply wounded, because she thought, oh my God, I've given everything to my daughter. And why does she diss me all the time? So yeah, they came to therapy together, and it was really wonderful to hear them communicate in a way that they had never communicated before, and be each one having space and time to share what they were truly feeling about each other in a safe way. So there was no accusations or hurling, terrible name calling or anything like that, but simply just being able to listen to one another and create boundaries that worked for each of them. Because actually the mom had been foregoing so much of her own life in service of her daughter. She wasn't dating. She wasn't doing anything. So the most beautiful day on the planet was when she was dating somebody and her daughter was dating somebody, and they would go out to dinner now and again and they would talk about it.
Oh my God. And that's so amazing. I think that's a really important thing, and that you can find the right support, right, to actually heal those kinds of relationships. And that the core, like it sounds like, you're establishing this common need between both of them, that they both love each other and they want to figure out healthy ways to love and be loved that work in the new era of the mother-daughter relationship.
And that's what's so important is trying to trust in that love, because I think that's what a lot of people lose sight of, is that there is still love. Like sassy rolling eyes, making snide remarks, it doesn't mean that somebody doesn't love you. In fact, it's indifference that means probably someone doesn't love you anymore. If you're still having that kind of energy, that's because there is a lot of love, and it gets friction. So you're trying to come back to that place of love. And by the way, I'd be the last person on the planet to say that this is an easy process. I think it's painstaking. It's a really challenging, difficult process, and it requires a lot of stamina, a lot of patience, a lot of self-love, a lot of self-forgiveness, and a lot of openness. And a lot of people don't have the energy for. So if you want to do this, you got to get it down there. You got to get down and dirty and do it.
Yeah, it's, exposing all that stuff is messy before it gets easier. And you have to be willing to it's almost like you have to be willing to be in that messy part when your child is an adult. It's almost like a little easier when they're a kid because you still have the control, right? They can't really never talk to you again, right? But when they're
audience. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, last thing. So what sort of the message do you want our listeners to leave with, and the people that read Sassy and Rude, Her New Attitude? How can they start sort of like implementing, and what's the message that you want everyone to really hear?
You said the word hope, and I really do hope that people have hope. I'm going to say that, underline it several times, because the idea is that if we put different ingredients into the mix, we're likely to get a different outcome. What do they say? The definition of insanity is to do the same thing over.
All right.
And expect a different result.
Yeah.
So something isn't working. That means it isn't working. So try something different. And I hope that this book offers many different tools and options and ways to think about things so that you can put a different ingredient in there and hopefully have a different result. And sometimes we have to wait for it. Sometimes we have to just say, maybe now is not the right time. Maybe your daughter's just had a child of her own. Maybe she's going to come around when that child is 4 years old and says, oh my God, I said I would never do that, but oh my gosh, I do that every day, because we do that, we say those things.
Yeah, 100%. And, and I think the last thing too, that I think is really important here is that ultimately, we're all become grown-ass women, right? And that if we don't do the work as the mother, as the daughter, not only does it damage the relationship between the two of those humans, right? But it ultimately impacts the way that you parent the next generation, how you are in relationship, how your friendships are. So to me, it's like if you're having a challenge with your daughter or your mom, it's a great opportunity to just say, oh shit. Yeah, I need to do some button unplugging.
Yes. And I hope more than anything that this book is on the coffee table, that the daughter brings to the mom or the mom brings to the daughter, that they both read together. I really wanted to write a flip book, where you do one side for the daughters and one side for the moms, but that was too complicated.
Too complicated, but I love it.
Yeah. I
love it. Ladies, check the show notes so you can get your copy of Sassy and Rude. Her new, I love the title. And you can also find more out about Dr. Debra Mandel at drdebraonline.com, the Love Warrior. And that link will also be in the show notes. Thank you for being here so much. I love this conversation. Ladies, you can follow me on social media, of course. Instagram, Marni Battista _. Facebook, I'm still there, old fashioned as hell. But you can be my friend. I just deleted a bunch of people so I could have more friends. Oh my gosh, by the way, while I'm recording this, you should all know that it's May 20th and it's literally snowing in Colorado. And this is a moment where you go, wow, I'm glad I don't live where she lives. I just looked out the window and I'm like, that's fascinating. Really? I wish I could show y'all. Crazy. Anyway, it's live, people. Also, if you are in a place where you would like to do that work and reinvent your next chapter, you could always reach out to us at vip@datingwithdignity.com. Doctor, thank you so much for your expertise. It's been a blast, and I wish you all the opportunity, no matter what. Remember, it's your responsibility to life check yourself. We'll see you next time. Bye. Hey, thanks for tuning into today's show. So if being in an intimate relationship in which you feel 100% seen, heard, and accepted by a high caliber man is a priority for you right now, and you're interested in seeing if you're a fit for working with me and my team at Dating with Dignity, here's what I want you to do. Just head over to DWD VIP, that's D as in dating, W, D as in dating, VIP.com, and book a call to speak with my team. We'll get on the phone with you for about 60 minutes and you'll get crystal clear on what's stopping you from finding true love right now. We'll also take a look at what you want to create, what you want your whole life to look like when you're able to finally be fully expressed as a woman in a healthy relationship with an incredible guy. And if we can help you get from where you are right now to where you want to be, we will show you the fastest path possible that makes sense for you to do that. We help smart, successful women all over the world solve this one missing piece in their life so they can finally have it all. So to see if we can help you do the same thing, head over to dwdvip.com. I'm Marni Battista, and let's talk soon.